I've been married for 28 years now, and I wondered this morning when I woke up if I've really learned anything. And I think maybe I picked up a few pointers along the way. Hello there, this is D, and welcome to Uneven. Hey, how you doing? I started to record this one a couple of times. I was outside on the back porch with my dog Murphy. But of course, Murphy decided not to cooperate with that. He was either barking at people, walking along the trail behind our house, or eating anything he could find from the ground. Two things we try to limit his exposure to when he's outside. So finally, I decided to come inside, head back down to the basement where I know it's quiet, and turn on the recorder and say hi. How you doing? Been going through a lot of struggles lately with family. My father-in-law is still health is still deteriorating. The news lately hasn't been good. We're still trying some treatment, but it has, a 50-50 kind of prognosis, I guess. So I don't want to elaborate too much, but it's put a lot of stress on us and especially on my wife. And I'm trying to just be as supportive as I can and just be as available as I can. We're going to hopefully pop up to see her folks live about 30 minutes from us. So we're going to pop up and see them again today. She was up there yesterday, just trying to spend time with them and help out as much as we can. But that whole interaction really got me thinking about relationships this morning and what maybe I've learned about my marriage. I'm going to refer primarily here to male-female marriage, heterosexual marriage, because it's what I'm familiar with. But I think a lot of it carries over into homosexual marriage, relationships of any kind, non-marriage, partnerships, any kind of long-term relationship that someone is involved with can be similar. There are a few things with marriage. I think it's more the commitment factor. I believe in marriage. I think it's a good thing, although I don't necessarily believe it's 100% good, and I think there's a lot of downsides to it too, and I understand why people may not want to get married today. I get where that's coming from, both men and women, for different reasons, and I understand that. But it bothers me that committing to someone for the rest of your life just isn't as popular now as it used to be. I think it's a direction that's not going to work well for us. I do believe we've been designed, whether by a supreme being or by evolution or whatever, to have a partner, to team up with somebody and to make a go at this life. And while there is an exit door to marriage, such as divorce, I believe for me it is an exit door that is used as last resort. Absolute last resort. And I hope it's one I never have to use. I've been married 28 years, and I can tell you right now, both my wife and I are looking forward to the next 28. And that is the greatest blessing of my life. Picking your partner, picking the right partner, picking somebody to spend your life with and have the discipline, patience, and courage to stick that out, I think is one of the most important decisions a person can make in their life. And I think there's something to that. I think we are built to value that relationship. But how do you make it work? How does somebody make a relationship last 28 years or 50 years or even 10 years for some people? And how do you find that person, that right person? I didn't get married till I was 30, and I am grateful every day that I didn't. I didn't know myself very well when I was really young. And I do think getting married later was Not a conscious decision. I had dated many different women before that, and some long term, but I always had this unspoken, I think, idea in my head that if it wasn't going somewhere, if I didn't really see myself getting married to this person, I'd usually, finally move on, or that other person would move on. When I was first dating, I was broken up with far more than I broke up with. I'd say 2/3 of all my relationships, I was the dumpy. And it wasn't until I got into college and a little more confidence that I became more the dumper more often. And I'll admit, neither side is pleasant. It's hard. It's hard to be that person. But I realized in college that I was really looking for that one person. When I met my wife at a singles party that I was throwing for a church group in Kansas City, I thought she was with my friend. My friend Carl walked in with her into this party. It was a Hawaiian luau at our community house. Painting a visual picture here for you. We had some beer and stuff like that, and we were just having a good time. And it was a singles mixer for the singles group at our church, this huge church called Village Presbyterian in Kansas City. I didn't attend the church, but I attended the youth group, or not the youth group, the singles group. I was in college. I was in past college, in my 20s at this point. And this woman walked in who I found instantly attractive, and with my friend Carl. So I figured, of course, she's his date. It's a joke that my wife constantly reminds me about, because as the party went on, I learned that Carl was her cousin, and that this was her cousin. It was his cousin from Colorado, and her name was Shanna. At the end of that night, the next day, I went over to visit my parents, and I told them I met the girl I'm going to marry. Yeah, it was that quick. Never told them I was going to marry anybody before that. Not once. Now, she lived in Colorado, and she had a boyfriend. But she was there cleaning out her grandfather's house, helping clean that out with the rest of her family in Kansas City, and she was there for a couple of weeks. So Carl, her cousin, and me, and her, the three of us, hung out together for a while. And I really got a chance to get to know her. The one thing that attracted to me before anything else, definitely found her physically attractive. But the thing that really was the clincher was her sense of humor. We both had somewhat similar dads, and dads with a strong sense of humor and who loved to laugh. But she had to go back home, and she had a boyfriend. A year later, I moved out to Colorado because my work took me out there. I was working for Sprint, doing database programming for them, and I went out there on my own, got an apartment, and I was living on my own for a long time. I reached out to her, but she wasn't interested at the time. And so I dated a girl there in Colorado for part of that time, but we didn't last too long, and most of the time I just spent by myself. It was really good for me because I got to know myself. And I finally reached a point that I felt, if I'm going to be alone the rest of my life, I'm going to be okay. I found my independence and found the beginning of myself and understood what I needed. Eventually, the company decided to move me back to Kansas City, found a different job, within the company, and so I moved back to Kansas City. And 2 weeks before that, I get a phone call. And it's Shanna. And she calls me and says that, she broke up with her boyfriend a few months ago, and she wanted to reach out. Well, we got together. The connection was still there 100%. And I came back to Kansas City. Wasn't long before the long-term relationship kept building, and she found a job in Kansas City, came out and moved with her aunt. We dated, we got married. That's kind of how it worked. So that girl, 2 years earlier that I told my parents I was going to marry, I married. It just took me a little while. And that was that connection. And I can tell you that connection hasn't faded. But how do you find that connection? How do you find that someone? I think a relationship is 50% finding the right person and 50% the work you put into it after. Marriage isn't easy, not by a long shot. I fell in love with a woman who also didn't want to have kids. I was ambivalent at the time. I always felt I would have children, mostly because that's what you did. But if I had to choose between being with her and having kids, I wanted to be with her. So I agreed. And it's just been the two of us. So I can't speak to relationships and the complications of children. I just don't know that. But I can speak to a one-on-one relationship with another person where you spend most of your time together. We now have both been working from home for several years. Spend 95% of our time in the same house with each other. And we're not looking to get out of it. For that, I'm very blessed. And I know that. There's a couple things that I want to talk about here that I think keep a relationship going. Romance is key. Love is key. Sex is great. I think that's an important piece. But I think the number one thing, in my opinion, you get from a relationship like this, and I'd heard this term some other people had talked about, but I think it fits, is that of a witness. Somebody with shared stories, somebody who's been in most of the things and experienced most of the things you've experienced. Somebody who has the same running jokes year after year after year. Somebody who you can just look at and they know what you're starting to think. There's a comfortability, I don't know. I keep making up words here. There's a comfort to having that in your life. There's a stability to having that in your life, of having that person, that one person who really gets you, knows you, and understands you. I don't know if we can ever understand people 100% or know somebody 100%, but when you hit that 90%, 95% threshold, it's pretty damn cool. So I think having that witness, that partner, those shared stories is key. And that's one of the great benefits of having somebody by your side. I think another thing that's a key with relationships is simply trust. Shannon and I have almost unwavering trust. Not saying we never get jealous or suspicious. I have at times. She has at times. When we do, we usually tell the other person. And when one of the other person tells me that, say she's jealous of something or is leery of this or whatever, I don't belittle her. I don't make fun of it. I understand it. In fact, I think it's flattering. For somebody to be jealous of you maybe having lunch with somebody else who's maybe female, in my case. And trust me, this has gone both ways. I've been that way and been cautious of that. It's a good thing, too, if it doesn't get carried away. Jealousy can become extreme and become very negative. But a little bit of jealousy is a good thing. It reminds you that that person doesn't want to lose you. And that's a good feeling to have. The main thing with jealousy in my mind is not to let it fester. but instead to talk about it. Just talk about it. And I think that's where trust comes in. We have trust. We have built our relationship on trust with each other. And that is paramount to who we are. And if that trust is broken at some point, then we would have to deal with it that time. But it hasn't been. And it's been a rock that I've been able to count on. And I think when she's been able to count on it, it makes our lives so much easier as you're dealing with the chaos of everything else around you. You know, another thing about this, about relationships, that I feel I don't hear talked about, especially in podcasts that cover dating and stuff like that. And I watch some of those just because I'm curious about relationships. It's something that's always fascinated me. But it's a term that's not used as much as it used to be. And that is love. I grew up in a world and a society and a time that you got married when you fell in love with someone. It was a feeling, it was an overpower feeling. And I'll admit that love is more the infatuation love, the in love that kicks in. And that's what attracts you to that person. You don't want to be a second away from that person, and it kills you when that person has to go away for a while or something. It's so hard to be. That's in love. That's infatuation love. And that's a great start. But that's not the love that carries you through. For those lucky few, and I'm one of those lucky few, that in love transitions into love, relationship love, long-term love, where I care deeply about what happens with this person, and I still want to spend time with that person. The sexual, the infatuation, that kind of love and lust, that gets you drawn in, but it's not what keeps you around. And it's nice to still have that around, and sometimes that in-love infatuation still lingers in bits and parts, but developing into that deep love is what's important. But I'm surprised that it seems like modern dating has become more of a competition. Men versus women. You know, all men are scum. You hear that plenty of times. And all women are girl bosses or whatever the term is, or, you know, are just mean and cutthroat and ball busters. You hear those terms. And there's some truth in both those. There are a lot of men that are total jerks. But they are the minority, in my belief. They are definitely the minority. And there are a lot of women who are total jerks. But they are also the minority. Most of the people out there still want to find that someone, but might not know exactly how to go about it, or how to find it, or how to even communicate, or even how to reach out without seeming like a creep or a clinging vine, or whatever the term is you want to use. It was simpler when I grew up. We dated. You'd call a woman on the phone that you met somewhere. If you got her number, you could call her up. You went on a few dates. If it kept going well, you'd go on more dates. Computer dating was around at the time, but not the apps. We didn't have the phone technology we have today. But it wasn't the primary method. And I don't think it's helpful today, I have to admit. I think it gears people towards more superficiality in a relationship. There's something to the one-on-one conversation. There's something to getting to know somebody at work. or at your coffee shop or at the library or wherever it is, or at the grocery store, that you meet repeatedly and you start up a conversation and it develops into a deeper conversation until one of you at some point asks the other one to join them for a drink or dinner or something. There's more invested in those situations. I don't know. I'm definitely not the expert in any of this. I am not a relationship expert. All I can speak to you is from things I've seen and learned and things I've experienced through my marriage. But I can tell you one piece, and this is where I think the male-female dynamic really comes into play, and that is communication. I had the benefit of being raised primarily by my mother and my sister. My dad was a traveling salesman. Loved him to death. He's passed away now, but he wasn't home most of the time. On average, 5 days a week, my dad was gone. He usually had a 4-state region, drove in the car, went around selling library supplies. So I think I picked up some stronger feminine traits by being raised more by my mom and my sister. I think that's good. It's somewhat bad. I think it's both. It's neither. It's created maybe a little more balanced person with me where maybe I understand the women's point of view a little more than the average guy. And maybe that's helped me in marriage. I think that makes sense. But the truth is, men and women, on average, and when I say men and women, I'm talking on average, communicate differently. Women are more communicative on average than men are. But it doesn't mean that men don't have powerful communications and powerful bonds. Ours are different. And I think it's really frustrating for many women who want that communication, that openness, that vulnerability from their man and can't get it. And I think that's a struggle. And I see that as a struggle. And I think it's good for men to try to be more open and share. Unfortunately, often these days when a man shares, they're often shot down too, and sometimes laughed at and humiliated and belittled. Because you're a man and you've had everything given to you, which I don't agree with, but that's the ongoing thought these days, it seems like. But I do think men can work a little bit on communicating with women, understanding what they need, understanding that when a woman complains to you about her day, it doesn't mean you need to fix it. And that's a go-to for guys. We want to fix the problem. I also think it's equally as important for women to understand men and how we communicate. We can sometimes communicate a feeling to another man in 1 or 2 words that I think some women can use 100 words for, because they want to, and again, on average, but women, I think, enjoy the conversation more. They enjoy that on average. I think for many men, that's uncomfortable. It's not how we communicate. Neither one, and this is the main thing with men and women. The thing we need to figure out, in my opinion, is simply this. There's no right or wrong here. I know this is a touchy subject, and I hate this, especially in today's day and age. We can't talk about this because it becomes a third rail conversation. That's the way I think of it. These are those third rail conversations. You heard of third rail politics or third rail, different things, which are the things you can't touch. You can't touch that third rail. It comes from like the electric trains and the L's in Chicago and stuff like that. You don't want to touch that third rail because it's high electricity and it will kill you. Well, we have a lot of third rail topics. Men and women, there's a lot of third rail topics in this. You can't even suggest that you are being negative towards one gender or the other. Otherwise, the other side is going to jump down your throat. But both genders are amazing and wonderful. And we need both. Yes, we need both. Men and women are meant to join. I believe that in some fashion. Not just physically. That's a good part. I like the physical part of joining. I'm a guy. I totally like that part. But more so as a partner. We are different for a reason. We're good at different things. Yes, men and women are different. Somebody's going to cancel me for that. I'm sorry, but we are. As a whole, on average. Are there some women that are more masculine than some men I know? Yeah. And there are some men that are more feminine than some women I know. Yeah. It's a spectrum. That's cool. Again, awesome. I'm probably a little more feminine than the average guy in some ways, although I have a lot of pretty strong masculine traits too, to be honest. But I do think being raised mostly by my mom and my sister, gave me some strong feminine traits, and I'm happy about that. You know what I love is I love romantic comedies. I love romantic comedies. Not a thing you hear most guys say, but I do. I love the hope that they have. I love the two people connecting together for a future that, at least in the movies, is happily ever after. In reality, we realize that's probably not how it ended, but the movie cuts off usually at the right time so you can think, hey, they lived happily ever after, and that's a good thing. But it's not easy. We are different as a whole. Men and women are different. And figuring out how to get along, how to find that compromise, how to find that middle ground is hard. My wife and I still have those times. We have arguments, we have discussions, we have heated moments at times. Not a lot of them, but we have them. But we're meant to be together. And this doesn't eliminate men and men being together and women to be together. I have no strong feelings on that whatsoever. I think if you find somebody you love, you want to spend your life with, that's awesome. I honestly do. I think it's great. I just talk more from a male-female perspective because it's what I know. It's what I'm familiar with, so that's what I can talk to. And as a whole, men and women are different. We have different communication styles, different needs, different desires. And trying a little bit to understand the other gender, I believe, can go a long way into making a strong relationship. I can tell you one thing that doesn't make a strong relationship, and that is bad-mouthing the other person, or even the other gender, nonstop. Yes, sometimes you can flippantly say, oh, women, or oh, men, or men are, in lightness, as just a fun conversation. I get it, and I've done it too. But if you're spending a good chunk of your time complaining about your spouse, a good chunk of your time complaining about your spouse's gender, there's a problem. And it's a problem you might want to address. It's a problem you might want to look at. I love women. Hey, I do, as a whole. Are there women out there, especially in today's political landscape, that piss me off? Absolutely. Are there some men out there today in today's political landscape that piss me off? Absolutely. But I really believe those are the extremes. I think most of us are in the middle. I think most of us want the same thing, whether man or woman. I really do. I think most of us want that someone. I believe most of us want that someone. And the funny thing is, if it was easy to find that someone, or if it was easy to make that relationship with that someone last, it wouldn't be nearly as meaningful. The things we work for in life have the most meaning. And that goes with relationships too. You need to dedicate time, effort, understanding, listening to each other to make a relationship work. Unfortunately, I think a lot of people today aren't willing to do that. And that brings me back to what started this conversation. It's in the dark times, it's in the hard times that I think we get the most benefits from having that someone in our life. I've had a lot of those times lately, over the last 10, 12 years or so. Between the deaths around me, with my parents and friends and cousins, and now with my wife's father struggling, and with my recovery from benzodiazepines and neurological difficulties. But it's the little things that get us through those times from somebody who we trust, somebody we count on, that person that we want to share with the most, that person who is the witness to your life. Is it important to have good friends too outside the marriage? Absolutely. Absolutely. I think that makes it just even that much stronger. But there's still that one person that I rely on and I want to be closest to. And if you're blessed enough to have that person in your life, then life is good. With all the shit, and I know it's shit lately, I'm saying it, but with all the shit I've gone through lately in the last several years, last decade and so, she's been the rock, the person that's been there, a person that reaches across to touch my hand, the person that holds me when I'm not doing so good. And I'm that person for her. And right now it's time for me to be reaching out, and I am. To be sacrificing my time to spend more time with her and her family. To just be there for whatever is needed. That's a relationship. In my mind, that's a healthy relationship. Maybe that's what you're all looking for. Maybe some of you have found it. Maybe you can share some stories with me about your search for or your life with that special someone. I'd love to hear from you, and I'd like to talk more about this. I think relationships are, this podcast is about life anxiety and being human. That's my going mantra, or the going tagline for this. And relationships are an essential, a huge part of life and being human, and even anxiety. I have opinions, like anybody has opinions about relationships. Am I right with all my opinions? No. Some of them probably are wrong. I know that. And I'm open to learning, and I'm open to hearing other sides. But I think in the last 10 years or so, the male-female dynamic has taken a huge hit for a lot of reasons. And I'd love to see if we can get back to a place where we're on the same team again. Because we need each other. We need each other more than we know. Well, that is my first diatribe on relationships on this podcast. And being episode 50 of the Uneven Podcast, I didn't start with that because I didn't remember it was 50 until just now. Maybe that's a great one to close out with on episode 50 of the podcasts. Hey, this is Dee. Sorry for this brief interruption. I do need to remind everyone that this podcast is for informational purposes only and should never be considered medical, psychological, or professional health advice of any kind. If you or someone you know is dealing with significant mental health issues, please seek professional help. Resources can be found in our show notes and on our website at unevenpodcast.com. And now, back to the podcast. I'd love to hear from you. I really would, on relationships, and then, I do want to take more of these comments and turn them around and talk about them. We'll do more Q&A episodes, but also maybe there's just an idea that comes through from one of you or a comment, and I'll just run with that and we'll talk about it. I love that because I want you to be part of this podcast more than anything. I don't want this to be all about me. It's some about me for sure. Maybe mostly about me right now. But I want it to be about us. I really do. But loneliness is an epidemic right now in this world. It's causing a lot of suffering. We're even losing people because of it. And I think it's something we need to address. And I think by choosing sides, picking at each other, complaining about each other, calling out each other, shaming each other, humiliating each other, these are not steps towards a more healthy future. The internet, the bane of my existence on this sometimes, and yet I'm using it to promote the podcast and to distribute the podcast, but the internet, in my flawed wisdom as it is, has not been a friend to relationships. And maybe we can find a better way of being. Oh, I should wrap this up. I have been rambling for a while. The basement, my feet are getting cold. I'm in shorts in the basement and my feet are getting cold. But that means I'm not getting the shooting pain in them right now, which is good. I get occasional shooting pain right now from whatever's causing it this time. It's just a Thursday. It's just another Thursday. Thanks for listening to the podcast. Thanks for being patient with me as I figure this out. And thanks for checking out at least one of the first 50 episodes. We're just getting started. I love y'all. Talk soon.